The silent cargo. The cargo bay smelled of rust and fear. Rows of cages were stacked against the cold metal walls, each one holding a trembling figure. The alien cat girls huddled together, their ears pressed flat, their tails curled tight against their thin bodies. The hum of the ship's engines echoed like a heartbeat, steady but merciless. To the guards, this was only another shipment, another load of creatures destined for slaughter. But to those inside the cages, it was the end of everything. The guards were tall reptilian beings with sharp scales and cruel eyes. They laughed as they passed the cages, tapping the bars with the ends of their electric spears. Every strike of metal against metal made the girls flinch. Some cried softly. Others simply stared at the floor with empty eyes. They had learned that crying did not bring mercy. It only made the guards more entertained, and then on this grim journey a new prisoner was thrown into the bay. He was not like the others. He was not a cat girl, nor a beast nor a hybrid. He was human. The guards dragged him across the floor and shoved him into the cage at the far corner. He fell hard but did not cry out. Instead, he sat up slowly and looked around with calm, piercing eyes. The cat girls whispered among themselves, "A human here." It was said that humans were dangerous. Some believed they were myths, stories told in hushed tones. Others believed they were cursed, beings who destroyed entire armies with nothing but willpower. Yet here was one chained and bruised, no weapon in his hands, no army behind him. He looked fragile, yet there was something in his eyes that unsettled even the bravest of the girls. The guards paid little attention. To them, the human was just another piece of meat. They mocked him, saying his flesh might taste better than the others. They joked that his bones would make strong ornaments, but the human remained silent. His lips pressed into a thin line, his gaze fixed on the shadows of the bay. Hours passed, and the ship kept moving through the void. The only light came from dim lamps swinging above. Every flicker painted the prisoners in shades of despair. The cat girls sat quietly, too weak to resist, but their eyes often drifted toward the corner, toward the human. They watched him because he did not act like the others. He did not shiver, he did not sob, he simply observed. And in the silence, his presence became a mystery they could not ignore. One young cat girl with silver fur and bright eyes dared to speak. Her voice was barely above a whisper as she asked, "Are you truly human?" The man turned his head slowly, his chains clinking against the floor. He studied her for a long moment before answering with a simple nod. No words, only confirmation. The girl's heart skipped. If the stories were true, then perhaps fate had brought him here for a reason. That night, as the guards laughed and played their cruel games, the human leaned against the bars of his cage. His eyes followed every movement of the guards, every step, every careless mistake. He studied them like a hunter studies prey. The silver-furred girl noticed. She could not understand why, but his gaze gave her a strange feeling, a spark of something she had not felt in many days. Hope. The guards grew bored and left the bay in silence. The sound of the door locking echoed like thunder. The prisoners settled into uneasy sleep, but the human did not rest. He pulled a small piece of metal from beneath his sleeve, hidden from sight. With careful movements, he began to scratch something into the floor of his cage. The sound was faint, almost invisible under the hum of the ship. Only the silver-furred girl saw him. Her eyes widened as she realized he was planning something. Fear and curiosity fought inside her. Was this human truly dangerous? Or was he their only chance? She pressed her face close to the bars and whispered, "What are you doing?" The man did not look at her. His voice was low, rough from thirst, but steady. "Preparing," he said. Only one word, but it carried weight. The girl leaned back, her heart pounding. For the first time, she dared to dream that maybe they were not entirely helpless. The ship rattled as it passed through turbulence. Chains clanged, cages shook, and the prisoners cried out. But the human did not falter. His hand moved steady, carving marks into the floor. Every scrape of metal against metal was like a promise. The cat girls did not yet understand what he prepared, but they could feel something shifting in the air. Something was different now. The silence was no longer only despair. It was a silence waiting to break. The silver-furred girl closed her eyes. She remembered the human's gaze, the sharpness in his voice. And in her heart she whispered a prayer, not to the gods who had abandoned her, but to the human in the cage, because maybe, just maybe, he was the one who could change their fate. The human's secret. The ship drifted through endless space, its engines growling like a beast in sleep. Inside the cargo bay, the prisoners sat in silence, their eyes heavy with fear. The cat girls whispered among themselves, voices trembling, tails curled around their bodies. But always their eyes returned to the far corner, where the human sat, chained but calm. He did not move often. He did not waste energy on panic or despair. Instead, he listened. He watched. He waited. Every step of the guards, every hiss of the doors, every flicker of the lights, he memorized it all. The silver-furred girl who had spoken to him before could not stop staring. Something about him pulled her attention like a magnet. It was not strength because his body was bruised, his skin cut, his muscles weak. It was not kindness because he did not smile, did not offer words of comfort. It was something else, something hidden, and she wanted to know what it was. When the guards left again, the bay sinking into darkness, she whispered across the silence, "Human, why are you here? Why would they capture you?" The man lifted his head, his eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. For a long time he said nothing, and the girl thought he would ignore her. Then at last his voice came, low and steady. "I was a soldier," he said. "I fought against them." Gasps rippled through the cages. A soldier, a human soldier here among them. The stories came alive in their minds, stories of humans who refused to bow, of humans who fought even when they had nothing, of humans who stood against whole empires and did not break. The guards had called him worthless, but now the cat girls looked at him differently. If he was truly a soldier, then perhaps he carried more than chains. Perhaps he carried hope. The silver-furred girl leaned closer, her voice shaking. "Why fight? You are only one. They are too many." The man's eyes narrowed, his face shadowed. "Because freedom is worth more than life," he answered. The words struck her heart like a blade, sharp and painful, yet strangely beautiful. He did not speak again, but his actions told his story. When one of the younger cat girls collapsed from hunger, he reached through the bars. He pushed the stale crust of his own ration toward her, though his hands shook from weakness. She tried to refuse, but his gaze commanded her to take it, and so she ate, tears streaming down her face. While he leaned back into the shadows, hungry but silent, the others saw this, and whispers spread quickly. The human was not like them, yet he shared his strength. He was not bound only by survival. He carried something heavier, a purpose they could not yet see. The silver-furred girl could not sleep. Her mind spun with questions. What was he preparing on the floor with his secret piece of metal? What did he plan when he studied the guards so carefully? Why had fate placed him here in the same cages as them, destined for the same slaughterhouse? She whispered again, her voice urgent. "Tell me what you are planning. Tell me why you scratched the floor." The human's lips curved into something that was almost a smile, but it was not warm, it was sharp, cold, like the edge of a blade. "You will know when the time comes," he said. Her heart pounded, equal parts fear and hope. The ship shuddered as it passed through a field of debris. Alarms buzzed for a moment before fading. The guards rushed through the bay to check the cages, striking bars with their spears. When one cat girl whimpered too loudly, a guard struck her shoulder, laughing at her cry. The human's eyes burned, his jaw clenched. But he did not move, not yet. The silver-furred girl saw his restraint and understood. He was waiting, not powerless, waiting. Later, when the guards left again, the girl whispered to him, "They will kill us soon when they reach the slaughterhouse. You know this." The human met her gaze, and his voice was like iron. "They will not kill you," he said. Her breath caught, her ears twitched. She wanted to believe, but how could she? He was only one man, one broken prisoner, chained and starving. And yet the way he said it, steady, unshaking, made her believe against her will. The others listened in silence, their eyes wide, their hearts trembling. Could one human truly change their fate? They had been raised to think themselves weak, powerless prey. But in the presence of this human, their despair cracked just slightly. Through the cracks, light began to seep. The silver-furred girl lay back against the cold bars. She stared at the ceiling, her lips moving without sound. For the first time in her life, her whispered prayer was not to the distant gods. It was to the human soldier in chains, the one who carried a secret plan, the one who carried hope. Chains of cruelty. The ship moved steadily through the endless dark, its hull groaning under the weight of stolen lives. In the cargo bay, the air was heavy with silence, broken only by the rattling of chains and the low hum of the engines. The cat girls clung to each other for comfort, their fur matted, their eyes hollow, their hearts sinking deeper each passing hour. They knew where they were going, they knew what awaited them at the slaughterhouse. And yet, in the corner, one prisoner sat differently. One pair of human eyes refused to surrender. The guards entered, with their usual cruelty, their reptilian laughter filling the bay. They carried electric spears, each strike sparking against the cages like lightning. The cat girls cried out when the bars shook, their tails puffing in fear. One guard opened a cage and dragged a young girl by the tail just to hear her scream. He laughed and threw her back inside, her sobs echoing in the dim light. The human watched, his jaw clenched, his eyes burning with quiet fury. He did not move, but every cruelty carved deeper into him. The guards saw his silence and mocked him. Human flesh is no different from theirs, one sneered. You will feed the market as well. But the man's lips curved into the faintest smirk, as if he knew something they did not. It unsettled them, though they would never admit it. The silver-furred girl pressed closer to the bars, her voice trembling. They are preparing us, she whispered. Soon they will send us away. Soon we will die. The human glanced at her, his eyes sharp like blades. Not if we break them first, he said. Her breath caught, her ears twitched in disbelief. Break them. They were the weak ones, chained and starving, while the guards carried weapons and power. But the human's voice did not waver, and that alone made her heart stir. When the guards grew bored and left again, the bay returned to silence. The human shifted his position, pulling his chains tight to test their strength. His wrists bled, but he did not stop. He leaned down and continued scratching marks into the floor with his hidden piece of metal. The silver-furred girl dared to ask again, "What are you doing?" His answer was the same, low and steady. Preparing. The others watched him now, their fear mixed with curiosity. Even the youngest, who had once stopped crying only to stare at the human's calm face. They did not understand his plan, but they felt something different around him. A force stronger than chains, stronger than despair. The beginning of defiance. Hours later, the guards returned for inspection. They carried chains and heavy collars, fastening them onto the cat girls. The sound of metal clinking against fragile necks echoed like a funeral bell. One by one, the girls were chained together, linked like animals to be dragged. The youngest whimpered. The oldest closed their eyes in shame. None dared to resist. None except the human. When a guard tried to lock a collar around his neck, the man jerked suddenly. The chain snapped against the floor, rattling through the bay. The guard struck him across the face with the butt of his spear, splitting his lip. But the human only smiled, blood dripping down his chin. The silver-furred girl's heart pounded. Even in pain, even chained, he did not bow. She had never seen such defiance, and neither had the guards. They bound him tighter, muttering curses, trying to erase their unease. When the guards left, the prisoners sat in silence. The silver-furred girl whispered, "Why do you resist when it only brings more pain?" The human leaned against the bars, his breath heavy but steady. "Because chains are only strong if we believe in them," he said. The words echoed in the quiet bay, bouncing from cage to cage. The cat girls stared at him, their eyes wide, their hearts trembling. Was it possible that the chains binding them were weaker than their will? No one had ever told them that before. That night, while the others drifted into uneasy sleep, the silver-furred girl stayed awake, watching him. She saw the way his hand never stopped moving, scratching marks, preparing. She saw the fire in his eyes refusing to fade even as his body weakened, and for the first time in her life she believed that maybe, just maybe, they were not helpless prey. Maybe they had a chance if they trusted him, if they followed him. The ship groaned again, turbulence rattling the cages, chains clattered, the prisoners cried out. But the human sat still, a shadow of determination in the corner. The silver-furred girl whispered into the darkness, "Human, what will happen to us?" His reply was quiet, almost like a promise. "You will live," he said. She clutched her chest, her eyes wet. In that moment she wanted nothing more than to believe him. And so in the dark cargo bay where despair ruled for so long, a spark was lit, a fragile, dangerous spark of defiance. The chains of cruelty still bound their bodies. But in their hearts, something new had begun to grow. Something the guards could not see. Something the human carried with him like a weapon, hope, whispers of rebellion. The ship drifted deeper into unknown space, its metal walls creaking as if burdened by the weight of countless souls. Inside the cargo bay, the smell of oil and fear lingered heavy. The cat girls sat in silence, collars biting into their necks, chains rattling whenever they shifted. To the guards, they were nothing more than livestock, destined to be sold, used, or slaughtered. But in the shadows of the far corner, a human prisoner carried something different, something dangerous. The silver-furred girl could not sleep. Her wide eyes kept drifting to the man. His head rested against the bars, but he was not resting. Even in the dim light, she saw his hand move, scratching carefully into the floor. Symbols, marks, maybe a plan. She could not tell, but every sound of metal against metal gave her a shiver of strange hope. She gathered her courage and crawled closer to the bars. "Why do you do this?" she whispered, her voice fragile. "Why risk everything when you know they will kill us all?" The man lifted his gaze, his eyes glowing faintly like embers in the dark. "Because no life deserves chains," he said, his voice low but firm. The words struck her heart. She had lived her whole life in cages, sold from one master to another. No one had ever told her she deserved freedom. Until now. She leaned back, her breath shaking. The human's words spread through her like fire. Her whisper was heard by another girl in the next cage, then another. Soon the words carried quietly across the bay. "No life deserves chains," they repeated, trembling but alive. It was not shouting, it was not rebellion yet. It was only whispers, but even whispers could be dangerous. The guards returned to deliver stale food and bitter water. They shoved bowls through the bars, laughing as the prisoners scrambled weakly to eat. But the silver-furred girl did not move this time. She stared at the human instead, waiting. And when he pushed his bowl toward a younger girl again, the whispers grew stronger. The others saw. The others understood. This human was not like the monsters who ruled them. This human shared his strength, even while starving himself. That night, when the guards left once more, the whispers spread. Further, they spoke softly about the human, about his words, about the fire in his eyes. The youngest asked, "Can he save us?" The older ones shook their heads, fear still clinging to them. "No one can fight them," they said. "No one can fight the chains." But even as they said it, their voices trembled with doubt, because the human had not bowed, and they had seen with their own eyes that chains could not break his spirit. The silver-furred girl pressed her face to the bars again. She whispered, "Tell us your name." The man looked at her, his eyes narrowing slightly. Names were dangerous. Names could be used against you. But after a long pause, he answered, "Call me Cade," he said. The sound of his name was like a spark in the silence. The cat girls whispered it among themselves, testing the shape of it on their tongues. Cade, the human who did not bow. From then on, the bay felt different. The silence was no longer empty. It was filled with quiet whispers, soft voices passing, hope from one cage to another. The guards noticed the change, but they did not understand it. They thought the prisoners had finally given up, their quietness mistaken for despair. They did not know that rebellion had already begun, not with shouts, not with broken chains, but with whispers. Cade kept working at night, carving lines and marks into the floor with his hidden scrap of metal. The silver-furred girl watched, her tail twitching nervously. "What are you writing?" she asked. He looked up briefly, his face unreadable. "A map," he said. Her ears flicked in confusion. "A map? But we are in cages. What good is a map?" Cade's lips curved into a faint smile. "Every prison has weak points," he whispered, "and every guard makes mistakes." She shivered because in his voice she heard not hope, but certainty. The guards came again and again, their cruelty never lessening. They struck, they mocked, they pulled tails and ears just to hear the cries. But now when the catgirls wept, they whispered Cade's words to each other. No life deserves chains. It gave them the strength to endure, and though the guards thought nothing had changed, something had changed forever. The silver-furred girl lay awake that night, her heart pounding. She thought of Cade's name, of his map, of his promise. She thought of his calm eyes, the way he never flinched, and she whispered to herself, "Maybe we will live." For the first time since her capture, she believed it. She did not know when or how, but she believed it, and belief, once born, could not be caged. In the silence of the cargo bay, chains still rattled, collars still cut into flesh. But the whispers of rebellion moved quietly from cage to cage, like sparks drifting across dry wood, waiting for the fire to come. And in the shadows, Cade kept carving, his hands bleeding, his eyes burning, because he knew the time was coming. Soon, and when it came, the whispers would rise into a roar, the spark of defiance. The ship shook as it passed through another sector of space, the lights flickering above the cages. The catgirls clung to their chains, their ears flat and their tails wrapped tight. The guards laughed as they steadied themselves, their claws tapping against their weapons. For them, turbulence was only a small nuisance. For the prisoners, every tremor felt like the universe reminding them that they were helpless. But in the corner of the bay, one prisoner did not look helpless. Cade sat with his back against the bars, his eyes sharp, his body tense. He had been silent for many hours, but silence was never emptiness for him. He studied, he listened, he counted every step, every key, every careless word from the guards. The silver-furred girl watched him, her heart beating with both fear and strange admiration. She whispered softly through the bars, "What are you waiting for?" Cade did not answer at first, his jaw tightening. Finally he murmured, "For the spark?" The guards returned with new orders, dragging chains across the floor. "Prepare them," one growled. "The slaughterhouse awaits." The catgirls whimpered as collars tightened and shackles locked into place. The youngest began to sob, begging for mercy in broken whispers. The guards struck the bars, their laughter sharp and cruel. But this time, something different happened. Cade rose, slowly to his feet, the sound of his chains rattling like thunder in the silence. Every eye turned toward him, every breath caught in the throats of the prisoners. He stood tall despite the bruises, despite the blood crusted on his skin. And when one guard shoved his spear through the bars, Cade moved with sudden fury. He grabbed the shaft of the weapon, pulling the guard off balance. The alien hissed in shock as the human yanked the spear through the bars. The catgirls gasped, their hearts racing. The silence of fear cracked apart. The guard tried to recover, but Cade struck fast. With the butt of the spear, he slammed the alien's head against the bars. The guard collapsed with a snarl, his weapon now fully in the human's hands. The other guards roared in alarm, rushing forward, their claws glinting in the light. But Cade was already moving. He turned the spear against them, striking with deadly precision. Chains clinked, prisoners cried out. The bay erupted into chaos. The silver-furred girl pressed against the bars, her eyes wide. She had never seen such defiance, never seen anyone fight for their lives this way. It was not only strength in Cade's movements, it was fury, it was purpose. Every strike was not for himself but for them. Every blow screamed one truth, that no life deserved chains. Run. Cade shouted, his voice breaking through the noise. Run when you can. The cat girls stared, frozen between fear and hope. Could they really escape? Could they really be free? One brave soul darted forward, squeezing through the chaos as a cage door cracked under the strain. Then another followed, then another. The spark was spreading. The guards fought back viciously. Their electric spears crackled, their tails lashed, their scales shining with rage. They outnumbered him, they were stronger. They had the advantage. But still, Cade fought. Blood ran from his lip, from his wrists, from his shoulder. Yet his eyes burned with fire. He was not fighting to survive, he was fighting to give them a chance. The silver-furred girl cried out as she saw him surrounded. Cade! She screamed, her voice cracking with fear. But Cade only glanced back at her, his expression calm despite the storm. Live, he said. That one word struck her harder than any weapon. She pressed against the bars, tears running down her face. He was not promising his own survival, he was promising theirs. The bay was chaos now, cages rattling, chains breaking, guards cursing. The prisoners began to move, pushing, pulling, struggling against their binds. Whispers of rebellion turned into shouts. The spark had become flame. Cade fought until his body began to fail him. His arms heavy, his breath ragged, his wounds deepening with every strike. Yet still he swung the stolen spear. Still he drew the guards' fury away from the others. He was the storm in the center of the bay, the shield between death and hope. And though the cat girls fled through broken cages, though their chains dragged and slowed them, they looked back and saw him, still standing, still fighting, a human against the impossible. The silver-furred girl was the last to move. She clutched, the bars, her heart screaming at her to stay. But Cade's eyes locked with hers, steady, commanding, "Go," he ordered, and with shaking hands she obeyed. She slipped through the broken cage, her chains clattering, her breath sharp with fear. As she ran with the others, she looked back one last time. Cade stood in the circle of guards, bloodied but unbroken. The spark of defiance burning brighter than ever. The final sacrifice. The alarm blared across the ship, a shrill cry that pierced the metal corridors. Red lights flashed above the cargo bay, bathing the chaos in bloody glow. The guards roared in fury as they closed in on Cade, their claws and weapons ready to tear him apart. But the human did not back away. He stood firm, battered and bleeding, his stolen spear still in his grip. The cat girls fled through the broken cages, their chains rattling behind them. Some stumbled, others pulled the weaker ones to their feet. They had never run. Before they had never dared. But now they ran because someone had given them the chance. Every step was carved from his sacrifice. The silver-furred girl looked back again and again, her chest aching. Cade was surrounded, blood streaking his face, his body swaying with exhaustion. Yet every time a guard lunged, he struck back. Every time they tried to break him, he refused. It was as if pain no longer mattered to him. Only their freedom mattered. The guards snarled to each other, their anger growing. "Kill him," one spat. "End it now." They lunged together, their spears sparking with electric fury. The impact shook the bay as Cade blocked, twisted and struck. But even his strength was fading. The silver-furred girl cried out his name, her voice raw. But Cade only gave her one look, sharp and unyielding. "Keep running," he mouthed. The fleeing prisoners reached the far door. They clawed and pushed at it, desperate to break free. But the heavy lock held tight, refusing to open. Panic filled their eyes. Had they escaped their cages only to die trapped again? Cade saw it, and something in his face hardened. He knew what had to be done. With his free hand he reached into the hidden fold of his sleeve. The silver-furred girl gasped as she saw a small device, crude and scarred. He had built it from scraps, from wires stolen and pieces carved from the floor. An explosive, his true secret. And he had kept it hidden for this moment. The guards saw it too and froze, their scales bristling, their eyes wide. "You wouldn't dare," one hissed. Cade's lips curved into a bloody smile. "Try me," he said, his voice steady. For the first time, fear flickered in the eyes of his captors. The silver-furred girl screamed, "No, don't!" Her heart broke at the sight. She knew what the device meant, she knew what he was about to do, but Cade only shook his head, his gaze fierce. "This is the price," he said. Her tears fell. But she understood. The guards charged, desperate. To stop him, Cade roared, his voice shaking the bay, "For freedom!" And with his final strength, he triggered the device. The explosion ripped through the cargo bay. Flames and smoke swallowed the metal walls. The guards were thrown into the air, their screams drowned by the blast. Chains shattered, cages crumbled. Doors blasted open, the prisoners were hurled forward, their bodies rolling across the floor, but the way ahead was clear. The silver-furred girl coughed through the smoke. Her body shaking, she turned back, her vision blurred. Cade was gone in the fire, his figure swallowed by light and shadow. Her heart shattered, a cry tearing from her throat. But through the pain, through the flames, she remembered his words. "Keep running." And so she did. Dragging the others with her, they stumbled into the corridor, free at last. The alarms howled louder, the ship trembling from the damage, but none of that mattered. They were alive. They had a chance, and they had it because one human had chosen to give everything. The silver-furred girl's legs carried her forward, though her heart felt heavy. Every step away from the bay felt like betrayal, but she knew this was what he wanted. He had not fought for his own life. He had fought for theirs, and now his final sacrifice burned like fire inside her chest. Behind them, the bay collapsed, smoke billowing through the ship. The guards who had survived scrambled in confusion, shouting in panic, but the catgirls were gone, vanishing into the corridors like shadows. The rebellion had begun, and it had begun with him. The silver-furred girl whispered through her tears, "Thank you, Cade." Her voice was quiet, but the others heard it, and they whispered it too, passing it down the line like a prayer. His name, his sacrifice, his fire. They carried it with them. They would never forget. Hope beyond chains. The corridors shook with the echo of the explosion. Alarms screamed through the ship like wounded beasts. Smoke rolled from the ruined cargo bay, the scent of fire and metal filling every breath. The catgirls stumbled forward, their chains dragging, their bodies weak but alive. Each step felt heavy, yet each step carried them farther away from death. Behind them, the human who had given everything was gone, swallowed by the flames. The silver-furred girl ran at the front, her heart torn apart. Every sound of the alarms reminded her of Cade's final words. "Keep running," he had said. And so she did. Tears blurred her vision, but she did not stop. She would not waste the sacrifice he had made. The others followed, some limping, some carrying the weaker ones. For the first time they moved not as broken slaves but as survivors. Every whisper of chains was matched with whispers of his name. Cade, the human. Cade, the one who defied the impossible. They repeated it like a vow, afraid the world would forget if they did not speak it aloud. At the end of the corridor they reached an access hatch. The lock sparked and smoked from the explosion's shockwave. The silver-furred girl pulled with trembling hands, and the door groaned open. Cold air rushed in, carrying the faint hum of space beyond. They stepped into a maintenance hall, wires hanging from the ceiling, pipes bursting steam. It was chaos, but chaos meant freedom. They moved quickly, though fear gnawed at them. Every sound of footsteps behind them made their ears twitch. Every shadow looked like another guard ready to strike. But none came. The explosion had thrown the ship into disorder, and in that confusion, they found their chance. At last they reached a docking bay, its massive doors sealed shut. The view windows looked out into the endless stars. The silver-furred girl froze, her breath catching. Beyond the glass, ships drifted in orbit, not alien ships but human ones. Large iron-gray vessels marked with symbols she had never seen before. Her heart skipped. Was this fate? Or had Cade known all along? The others gasped, some dropping to their knees in shock. They had heard stories that humans were scattered, lost across the galaxy. They had never believed the stories of human fleets, and yet here they were, weapons bristling, engines glowing, alive and real. The silver-furred girl pressed her hand to the glass, her voice trembling. Cade, your people are here. She turned to the others, her tears glimmering in the red light. We are not alone. Not anymore. Hope surged through the group, fierce and sharp. For the first time, the chains on their necks and wrists felt lighter, because freedom was no longer a dream, it was close. The ship jolted as enemy reinforcements scrambled. Alien soldiers poured into the docking bay, their weapons raised, their roars echoing. The cat girls shrieked in fear, clutching each other. The silver-furred girl stood in front of them, her tail bristling, her ears back. Her body shook, but her voice was strong. We will not bow, she said. The soldiers sneered, stepping closer, but before they could strike, the bay shook again. This time from outside, one of the human ships fired, its cannons tearing into the hull of the alien vessel. The walls cracked, alarms screamed louder, air hissed from ruptured pipes. The alien soldiers turned in panic, shouting orders. And in that moment, the silver-furred girl saw what Cade had given them. Not only escape, not only survival, he had given them the courage to face fear. The docking. Bay doors split open under the pressure, emergency shields flickering to keep the air inside. Through the crack, human Marines stormed in, their armor shining, their weapons blazing. The alien soldiers tried to resist, but they were no match. For the disciplined fire of the humans, in minutes the bay was theirs. The cat girl stood frozen, their eyes wide, their tails twitching in disbelief. Humans had come, real humans, armed and unbroken. One Marine lowered his weapon and looked at them. His visor reflected the terrified but hopeful faces staring back at him. Survivors, he called out, his voice firm. Secure them. The silver-furred girl stepped forward, her chains clinking, her hands shaking. Her voice cracked, but she forced the words out. There was one. A human. He saved us. He gave everything. The Marine's visor tilted slightly as if he already knew. We'll honor him, he said, his voice heavy. The silver-furred girl's knees buckled, but strong hands caught her, lifting her gently. The others gathered around, their whispers rising together. Cade, Cade, they repeated. His name filled the bay like a hymn, like a promise. As they were led onto the human ships, the silver-furred girl looked once more at the stars. Her heart still ached, but now it burned with something new. Cade's sacrifice would not be forgotten. It would live in every step they took, in every breath of freedom they claimed. She whispered softly so only the stars could hear. You gave your life so we could live, and we will live, Cade. The human fleet turned its engines, ready to leave the battlefield behind. But for the cat girls, this was not the end. It was the beginning, hope beyond chains, born from the sacrifice of one man, a spark that would burn across the galaxy.